There you go. For anyone, i.e. Richard, that asked me to record it for him. So Richard, I'm going to test you to make sure you watched it. Okay, so maybe in hindsight, a Hanukkah share would have been more appropriate, but I only thought about it this morning. And after I advertised a share not Hanukkah, I thought about changing it. But you know what? The interesting thing about maybe the connection, you know, we're doing sort of a little bit of ethical, a little bit, but halachic. You'll see where we're going to go with this in a few minutes. But what's the connection to Hanukkah? And I think actually it's staring you in the face, because one of the big main ideas about Hanukkah is 8-day festival, and every day we have to light Hanukkah candles, as we know, right? So, and when do we light Hanukkah candles? The beginning of the night. So in the winter, night starts when it's not really night. As in, by 3 something, it's getting dark. Shkia sunsets at 4-ish. And you start lighting 4, maybe 5, but that doesn't feel like the night, you know? It's a bit like when Yom Tov comes in, then you have your meal and then you go to bed, and that's Yom Tov. But when Hanukkah comes in, you light your candles and you've still got like half the day still to go. You know what I mean? So a part of Hanukkah is about taking the everyday things that we do every day and making them a part of our life, but in a heightened way, in a spiritual way. We just get on with it. There's no Yom Tov meals. There's no malacha. You know, we refrain around the candle lighting from doing other things, but essentially it's a normal day. A little bit of times for candle lighting, and then we get on with the rest of the day. And so we have to take every day and the everyday things that we do and make them special. And that's a part of what Hanukkah is about. So we're going to look at some just everyday things and understand a bit more about them. And what I want to do with this is I'm actually going to share the source sheet in the chat, just in case you want to follow along. Bear with me. There we are. Drag it in. So you should see it now in your chat function. Sent successfully to everyone. Lovely. So if you want to download that and have a look, you can follow along. We'll wait for a minute before we get to the actual source sheet. Oh, don't leave the meeting. Just want to get rid of that. It's hard to multitask. There you go. Right. Okay. So here we go. There is an idea that if Torah and Halacha has to come and teach me something that feels like it's obvious, it clearly wasn't obvious. The classic case is, why do I need thou shalt not kill to be one of the 10 commandments? Is it not possible? Is it not obvious that we shouldn't kill people, right? Thou shalt not steal. Is it not obvious that we shouldn't steal? Now, I'm not going to go into those topics today. So some of the things that I'm going to suggest potentially today, maybe they're poshut. So what do we need a whole share about them? So clearly they're not poshut, clearly they're not obvious, and Torah has to give us a reason. It has to give us a perspective and take an opinion about something. And what I've chosen to do today is take some seemingly quite simple and maybe even obvious questions and see what the Torah has to say about them and why. And actually what we're going to try and do is have a fascinating look between halacha, minhag. What's a minhag? Custom, tradition, right? So traditionally, when we talk about minhag, we talk about, you know, whether you eat beans and peas on Pesach. That's a minhag, right? Or you know, what time you light candles. There's different minhagim, right? That's what we understand to be a minhag, and we hold minhagim in the greatest of, you know, we hold minhagim to be, you know, very, very high up in the priorities of life. However, there's a further minhag medina, the practice, the custom of the land. Now we know, and we discussed it before in previous shirim, that the din, the minhag, the law of the land is very important. And when halacha and the law of the land contradict, what do we follow? Law of the land. Not so simple, right? So we're all now thinking of like major cases. What I want to show us today is where there is not a confrontation, but where it depends on the situation, where sometimes Torah adopts the minhag of the land as the halacha. And I'm going to explain as I go through. Before we do that, just a sort of an outlook. We're talking about trying to use this understanding of custom, of minhag, to what established practices are in the law, or in halacha, or in customs, or in industries. And I'm going to explain all this. And therefore, because The Torah doesn't say what to do in certain situations. It doesn't list every given scenario. It relies on local practices. I'm going to explain everything as I go along. I wanted to show you in the first source here, Rav Moshe. Rav Moshe has his Teshuvot, has his halachic works, all halachic and questions and answers and rulings about various topics. And he says something really important, and he says something that really is going to be like the introduction. And he says, this is something that's now it's pashut. This is something clear, obvious. That there are many dinim. He says, Shekol elu dinim, these dinim that we're talking about. He's talking about Choshen Mishpat, he's talking about the halachas specifically in context to do with business practices, but they are taloi, they are dependent for minhag ha-medina. That's not halacha, that's not Jewish practice going back thousands of years, that's minhag ha-medina, that's the law of the land, the customs of the land. For example, and he gives an example from the Gemara, talking about rights of employees versus what the responsibilities of employers are. For example, how many breaks, if any, do you have to give your workers? Do you have to feed them? How many hours do they have to work? So the Mishnah goes through some of these things, but doesn't necessarily prescribe them. The Torah says you have to do X. No, says the Gemara, it depends on the local customs and the local circumstances. I'm going to get to a little bit later on. In the third line, al pi chachmei Torah. Therefore, practices about how we deal in business aren't always legislated in Torah. V'gam af lo al pi Yehudim dafka. In fact, many of these things don't even come from Jewish sources, from Jewish people. You might be living in a place, like Moshe's living in New York, right? Lots of Jews there. You might be living in a place where there aren't that many Jews, and therefore the Jewish people, the Chachamim, the wise ones, or just some lots of Jews aren't going to dictate what the law of the land will be. And therefore, the law of the land becomes like the Torah's approach on what to do. Like the minhag ha'ir becomes as if this is halacha, which is fascinating because what we're essentially saying is with Moshe, when it comes to, again, we're not talking about halachic things. We're not talking about kashrus or shabbos or, chagim. We're talking about dinei mishpatim. We're talking about business dealings, talking about courts. We're talking about how appropriate it is in offices and in the business world that local practice becomes and is adopted into halacha. Okay, and that's a good place to start in order for us to go forward. So I've did a bit of research, tried to find some cases where it's not poshut, even though it sounds it should be, and how do we adopt this attitude on local custom, and how far do we take it using a few different Gemara examples. So the 4 examples I've got is, so they're a bit American, you'll see why, but we'll adapt them to our needs because this is what was written about. So let's take the following scenario. Let's just say a Jewish bus driver or a Jewish person who works for TfL. 4 cases, the first one. Jewish person who works for TfL, driving trains. And this would never happen in London, but they want to go on a strike. The union says we're going to go strike. And this Jewish train driver...
Done that. Take the middle.
So just be muted, whoever that was, thank you. This Jewish train driver who works for TfL and belongs to the union doesn't want to strike. He's happy for whatever reason, with his pay, he's happy with his benefits, whatever reason. Is he obligated to join the strike? Right? Is he obligated to join the strike? La halacha. What is Jewish law? What do you say? Anyone can shout out an answer.
As long as the union is obligated to strike.
Yeah?
Otherwise, he's known as a black shirt.
One second. So Michael says he's known as a blackleg, yeah, but that's just a label he's given. But is he obligated to strike? Is a union member whose union is striking, are you obligated to join the strike? No. It's a good question, right? Are you obligated? I don't know what the law is. I don't think there is the law. What does Halacha say? This guy went to ask Israel. This guy, the Shiloh was asked, he said, I'm a Jewish bus driver in a quite populated Jewish area. My union is going on strike. So if I join the strike, the kids won't be able to get to school. But my union is going on strike. What should I do? Question number 1. You see how now we're going with all this. Case number 2. We're going to try and answer some of these, if not all of them. Another good one. Shopping online. Okay, totally different idea. Shopping online. At what point, when I buy something online, does the item become mine? So I'm on Amazon. Amazon is a bad example. Let's take a Jewish website, a local Jewish website. I've never done this. Let's say Divrei Kodesh, the Jewish bookshop in Edgware, has a website. And I can go on. I actually don't think they do. I think they get all their books from up north. But let's just say Divrei Kodesh has a website, and I want to go order a salt shaker for Shabbat tables, right? Whatever it is, or a book. So I go on the website, Jewish website, nice and local. I'm a Jewish person, and I order a salt shaker and sit on the table for Shabbat. An hour later, after having purchased it online, I thought, I don't want it. Or more likely, Lisa comes and goes, why'd you buy that? It's hideous, right? Shouldn't talk like that, but let's say that happened. So I go back and I phone them. I say, I made a mistake. I don't want it anymore. And they said, well, you bought it online. It's yours, right? Is it mine? I paid for it on the credit card. Let's say keep it halachic.
No.
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 Right? Why not?
It's not in your possession. You haven't got it.
It's not what, but I paid for it. I gave them my credit card.
Matter, you haven't actually in your hand. It's not in your possession yet.
Anyone else?
I don't shop online, but isn't there a calling off period when you buy something?
Okay, 1 second. So yeah, many places will offer either a cooling off period or you've got 28 days to return, and there might be a law of the land thing that goes on. It could be, but I don't know. But let's say there's no policy. They say, we don't have a policy of that in this store. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't use real names, but okay, Divrei Kodesh is not our Divrei Kodesh. This is a nice name for a bookshop in another area called not Edgware. Well, I have a situation, but it could be a real situation. You go online from a Jewish place, you order it, and you decide after you've given your credit card, I want to void the transaction. Halachically, do you have, we'll go there and then we'll go down.
English law says that for mail order, which includes online, that you have a period of time to return it. So according to English law, it's not yet yours.
Again, thank you.
I would say it depends where it is.
Still in their shop.
Still in their shop.
Nothing happens.
It's still left the shop. It's still under their care duties. It's still their possession.
Right.
So they're still responsible for it, in which case they haven't sent it out to you. You haven't picked it up. It's still theirs. It's still theirs,
right? So they have to oblige me, right? They have to.
And they haven't specified which one it is you're buying.
They haven't. So says Graham. They haven't specified. They've got 6 salt shakers in their store cupboard, and it could be any one of those. So I think the feeling in the room here,
get a contract.
You have to. We're going to get. I think there was talk about 1 second. You have to. No, they have to. They have to give you your money back. They have to refund you, right? Because you haven't actually picked it up. According to Halacha. Anthony, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say that you've actually entered into a contract once you actually purchase it.
How? Where's the contract?
Well,
the exchange of money.
Yeah.
Could be. It could be. All right, and we're going to see. These are good questions, right? That's to say. The third is coffee breaks in the workplace, right? Let's just say you're a Jewish guy or girl, person, working in an office, and you have a 9 to 5 out, you're contracted to work 9 to 5, so you do your 9 to 5, in there you're entitled for a 1 hour lunch break, you can take a 1 hour lunch break, and there's an assumption that you can have a cup of coffee or 2 during the day, right? How many coffee breaks can you have? Seriously, how many coffee breaks can you have? Can I have 5 cups of coffee? But forget whether I should have 5 cups of coffee. Let's say they're very weak. I know people that like weak coffee. Can I have 5 cups of coffee and each coffee takes me 10 minutes and I'm not being productive in that time? I'm talking about both. Halachically and just ethically, legally. Okay, so perhaps it's halachically no.
You're stealing the time.
You're stealing the time.
Yeah, absolutely great.
Yeah, so we've got a bit of a groundswell here for, you know, I wouldn't like to work for you guys. Okay, once it is, I'll come to you in 1 second. But just to understand, you're saying no to any
No. They have to be able to have a break in order to rest.
They have a lunch break. They have a lunch break.
They need a couple of comfort breaks.
So two,
Within reason.
Two, one mid-morning, one mid
two 11s and afternoon tea.
That's right.
Right. So
Not the contract.
if it's not, oh, I'm definitely not working for you. Says David. If it's not in the contract, I saw. Okay, say that. Okay, Liz.
It's nice to think that a boss would always allow their staff and all their employees to have a break at regular intervals. But when you're contracted to work for a set number of hours per day with a stipulated lunch break. And the hours that you work don't usually include a tea or a coffee break.
That's true. Yeah.
Were you giving me law?
And experience.
And no, but I'm saying, are you saying this from a Halacha, Jewish perspective?
Sorry, can't hear you.
Sorry, the sound's not good our end.
Arthur,
Oh, sorry.
are you hoovering?
Yeah.
Can you hear me any better now?
I think
Yeah.
it depends who you work for and what they give you.
Okay, so what we're talking about in a place where, let's just say you're working for a big firm. Let's everyone mute. You're working for a big firm, and I didn't follow the advice someone gave me last time, was to appoint someone to do all the meeting. I totally forgot. So if someone wants to next time, volunteer to do that. You're working for a big firm, and it's not, if you're working for a small company and there's like 5 people in the office and it's all a bit like everyone understands where they are, but let's say you're working for a big firm, you're not going to go to your manager and say, can I have extra coffee breaks? Because, and it's interesting actually, if you think about what COVID's done, COVID has made everyone appreciate the coffee breaks a bit more. I had someone tell me quite early on in lockdown that there was a couple of big business dealings that their big lawyer firm, and one of the junior partners made a big mistake. And it's something, he said, it's just something that wouldn't have happened had we all been in the office, because you're in the office, you'll go for a wander, you'll think about something, you'll go down and have a coffee, and you might catch someone else and you have a chat and you have a smooth with them. And these mistakes would get either mistakes or these people, you haven't got the confidence to pick up the phone, but it's something, we all have it, right? So you're dealing with something. I'm often thinking about something and Barbara will come in and have a chat, and while you're here, we'll have a chat about something, and all of a sudden it makes much more sense. So there is not just the rights of the coffee break. It's actually, it might be. I'm just giving you a different perspective. Let's leave the fourth one for a minute. Well, I'll give it to you anyway. The fourth case I saw was about paying vendors on time. There are certain industries and there are certain practices apparently where it's a known thing. You don't have to pay. You get the bill, you ignore the first one. You get the bill, you ignore the second one. It would never happen in Belmont Synagogue or in the United Synagogue. But it's just a known thing. But I couldn't think of a good example of where I don't know.
You have often in business you have 30-day.
Yeah,
an invoice has to be paid within 30 days.
It has to be within 30 days, but exactly. So when it comes, it's like a known thing, but like maybe you'll go by the reminder as opposed to it's like a known thing within industry. So where it becomes a known thing in the industry, you don't have to pay. Is it? Let me just. There you go. If because a known thing in the industry that you don't have to pay it on time. Are you not obligated to pay on time, even though it's a known thing you don't have to pay on time? Okay, that was a bit, I was struggling to sort of, yes, Liz or Anthony with the hand up, or was that before? You're muted.
That was for before. So
Sorry, we haven't taken it away.
Let's get into the meat and potatoes of some of these things. So the first one, and we're gonna take a couple of different examples from the Gemara and plug them into some of these cases. So let's go from the online, the non-Divrei Kodesh example, right? So look at the Gemara here in source number 2. Just a couple of lines, but it's an important Gemara for this. And as we're going to learn these 3 lines, we're going to see if we can eventually plug it back into our case of buying something online, whose it belongs to, at what point. So Amar Rav Papi Mishmei de Rava. So we have Rav Papi, who says in the name of Rava, Hi, Situmta. Anyone know what a situmta is? You heard of a situmta? Probably not, right? It's not something you come across every day. So let's go to Rashi to tell us what a situmta is. If you flip over the page, source number 3, Rashi explains what is the situmta Let's say you want to purchase a barrel of wine, right? A big barrel of wine. Yeah, right, Salvador, you like wine? Ever purchased a barrel? They're probably quite heavy, right? They're probably quite heavy. Now, Cynthia mentioned the thing before, and I think there was a kind of thing we were talking about it. When do you actually own it? There are laws of a kinyan. What's a kinyan? A kinyan is an acquisition. Put simply, it's complicated, but let's say kinyan is an acquisition. So how do you acquire something? Either by hagba'ah, which is like to pick it up. So once I hold something, ki'ilu is if I take in some way ownership of it. So, for example, if I walk into your house and there's a nice ornament on the shelf, it's not as simple as this, but I'm just giving you an example. And there's a nice ornament on the shelf, and I pick it up because I'm not minding my own business. I'm like, oh, look at this, it's nice. And I break it. There's a part of it now that I own, I take responsibility for because I picked it up. Now, of course, I don't own it because that would be stealing. But if I break it, depending on exactly the circumstances, once I touch or interact with something, there's a part kinyan, there's a part acquisition to it. So that goes in business specifically. That's where we learn it from, right? If I want to buy something, when I give the money, at what point do I actually own it? Most people in halakhic authorities understand it's only fully mine when I pick it up. But I've got something that I can't pick up. I can't pick up a field. I can't pick up a cow. I can't necessarily pick up a barrel of wine. So at what point do I take ownership of it, especially if I can't pick it up? So, says the Gemara, there is a case called a situmta. And what is a situmta? A situmta is a transaction that is, according to Rashi, chaysem, you sign it. So I go into the wine cellars and I look in the store cupboard and I say, I want that barrel of wine. And what does the store kind of say? It's yours. And he writes Levine on it. He writes Levine on the barrel of wine and it becomes mine. That's a situmta, right? Makes sense? We understand what a situmta is? It's not a kinyan. It's not an acquisition that I can pick up or push or drag or step or lie on or whatever it is, but it's something that's now designated to be mine. Let's say transaction has happened. So the Gemara says, hi situmta kanya, right? It works as a form of kinyan, of a form of kinyan. Lamai hilchasa. So let's practically understand what the halacha is. Let's practically understand what the halacha is. Rav Chaviva Amar, he says, Lamakne mamash, a situmta is a full acquisition. It's a full acquisition. It works. You put the name on it, it's yours. Right? Rabbanan, the rabbis argue with Rav Chaviva and they say, no. Amrei nikibla alecha mi shipara. Now, what is mi shipara? Mi shipara is from a pasuk, is from a verse that is talking about those who do not abide by their word, who do not honor the things that they say that we're going to do. Mishapara, the one who punishes, i.e., God, in reference to the flood, in reference to, I'm not going through the whole idea now. There's a concept of Mishapara. The concept of Mishapara is that we actually want to abide by the words that we say that we're going to do. So if I say I'm going to do something, if I say I'm going to buy that barrel, I'm going to buy that barrel. Even if I haven't exchanged the money, even if I haven't picked it up yet, once I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Why? Mishapara. Because God punishes those people that don't honor their words. So the rabbis and Rav Chaviva are arguing. Some people say a situmta is an actual kinyan, it's an actual acquisition, and it works. And some of the rabbis say, no, it doesn't actually work, but because of this concept of mishapara, because of the concept that I will always want to abide by my word where possible, it works. It's a subtlety, right? But one says the actual kinyan works and one says it doesn't. So the Gemara says, okay, I've got two opinions. What's the halacha? How do I practice? The hilchasa likiblei aleha mishapara. It doesn't actually work as a kinyan, la halacha, but we hold in the situmta that it works because people hold of their words. So it works, but it's not an actual kinyan. Why am I going on about this? Because it says, uva asra dahanhigu limiknei mamash. But if you are in a place where they hold a situmta works the gamrei, it always works the kinyan, kanu, right? Kanu. That's the halacha. For the now we're seeing something within the Gemara that a local law where the practice is not in a Jewish state, not in a Jewish town. The local law where the practice is a situmta is a valid transaction that overrides halacha, because the halacha says there's not an actual transaction and there's ways of getting around it. So if we plug all that back into our online case, what do you say? Difficult, right? Anyone? Plug all that back in, right? What's halacha saying? Halacha is now saying, well, it's not a transaction according to us, but if the local practices would say what you did is enough of a transaction, it's a transaction. So should I therefore now demand my money back, la halacha, or should I accept the fact that I bought it based on what I've said? Anyone? Anyone down there? You can on Zoom. You can also have a go.
It depends on the local law.
And what does local law say?
We talk about a shopkeeper's law or local law.
We're talking about
Because shopkeeper says that's invalid.
whatever the shopkeeper has decided that he wants to do, because that's the local law, because that's how it works.
So isn't the local law, sorry to interrupt you, but isn't the local law whether in English law it's a valid transaction from which you can't withdraw, rather than the shopkeepers?
So it's in English. For my understanding is local law would allow me to get my money back because of calling off periods, because of whatever it is.
That's the law across everything now.
Yeah, you've got. There is always a grace period, from my understanding. Someone down there might be able to help. Cynthia's nodding. I think Dad's on there as a magistrate. I don't know if magistrates know about these things, but when you purchase something according to English law, there is always a calling off grace period. So if that is local law and practice, halacha will tell you mikar hadin. You can actually deny it. You can say, I don't want it. I never purchased it. Well, I did purchase it. I said I would do it, but I'm actually going to go back on my word. La halacha, I don't have to give the money and I don't have to take the thing. But according to local law, you're gone.
Normally, when you will buy online, you will accept the terms and
Conditions of the
trade.
Mm-hmm.
Basically,
There's a box that we don't realize we tick when we
that's
pay.
the local,
And that's the local law. So you're following, yeah, potentially. What's interesting is, and we might come to it. The only reason I've left my phone here is because Lisa had to take Racheli to some Golders Green Hanukkah party, so I've left Miri at home. Don't trust me. So no, they're gone to bed. They're fine. Oh my gosh, my parents are watching. I'm very irresponsible. So I've left my phone here in case. I said, Miri, call me as a problem. I'm 2 minutes away. So that's why my phone's there. So I'm ignoring it unless it rings Miri. They're fine. They're in bed. What can possibly go wrong? I didn't want to cancel the shit. I know, we're doing it in person. Okay. So, that's just one example. But I wanted to bring out the Gemara because it's really interesting because, and actually what we're going to see now is even more interesting, right? Look, turn over the page to the second side. This is talking about the power of minhag, but where minhag and halacha collide. So we're talking about where halacha potentially and English law collide. Well, what happens when halacha and minhag collide? What am I suggesting? So let's talk about, and this happens, by the way, in English law as well. Let's just say you have a contract of working hours. No, that's a bad example. Let's just say, because that's the halakhic side, I'm just trying to think. When you, I don't know, maternity cover, right? Let's say it's maternity cover. There is a legal requirement of maternity cover that will fill in, I don't know what it is. Anyone know? I should know, probably. I probably had a kid more recently than most of you. Okay, so Rivka's 7, so 7. Maternity cover, maternity leave, right? I think, I think it's 12 weeks or 13 weeks. It's a year, right? But let's just say you sign a contract, or let's say my wife, well, I have maternity leave, right? Let's just say I sign a contract. I think I'm allowed 2 weeks. I think it's gone up. In my day, it was 2 weeks. Let's just say it's 2 weeks, maternity leave. And I sign a contract that says, I signed the contract because I didn't read it properly, that says I get 3 days paternity leave, right? What would happen? It's overridden by the law, right? I've signed something that is binding in a contract, but they can't hold me to it if it contradicts what the statutory rules are. Right, that's simple. The same goes by halacha. There's a Yerushalmi in source number 4 that I didn't bring the whole thing. It's discussing what if the local practice is working hours are 9 to 5, and you in those local practices are trying to contract your workers to work from 7 till 7. We can't really think of today's world because that's a very reasonable thing to do, but we're talking about in a time where you contract a worker, that's the times, that's what people do in the area, they're the working times. So the Gemara says, Amarav Hashia, Zeis Hameris, a minhag mavatal et halacha. There are times where the minhag, the local practice, the local established way of doing something for that industry in that town overrides the written contract that you try and have with the person, just like it does in English law. And it goes further in the next Gemara. Rav, listen to this is fascinating. Rav Bo Rav Yehuda b'Shem Rav, right, in source number 5. Im Yavo Eliyahu Hanavi, if Elijah the prophet comes down and tells us a particular halacha, and the halacha that they're talking about in this Gemara is the halacha of chalitza. So we have an idea that it have halacha from the Torah that says if a Jewish man unfortunately passes away without children, he's married, he passes away without children, and he has a brother who is not married, the brother should now marry his widow, right? And there's two things that can happen, either yibum or chalitza. Yibum is they marry, or chalitza is they don't want to get married for whatever reason, and there's a ceremony called chalitza. You take a shoe, you split in the shoe, we're not going through it now. What type of shoe can you use for chalitza? Could it be any shoe? Does it have to be a particular type of shoe? 1 second. So the Gemara is discussing it, right? If Eliyahu comes down and says, the shoe you use for chalitza is a min'al. There's two types of shoe. There's a min'al, which is a closed shoe, or there's a sandal, which is a sandal, which is an open shoe, right? So if Eliyahu says, bear with me, it's going to make sense, says, for chalitza, you can use a min'al, but then he says, she'ein chotzim b'sandal, but you can't use a sandal for chalitza, ein sheimin. We don't listen to him. Why? Because local practice is, for whatever reason, that we use a sandal for chalitza. We use an open-toed shoe for chalitza. But Eliyahu Hanavi is coming to tell us this is a great prophet. Why would you not listen to him? Because the minhag takes precedence over the halacha. It says, minhag mavatel et halacha. But it's the halacha. Eliyahu telling me how to do it. No, we have a minhag. We have a custom. It has to be based on a real Masorah, on a real tradition. This can't be just a minhag shtus, a made up minhag. You know, people are flying out minhagim all the time about things that we didn't even know existed. Not that kind of minhag. But when it's a legitimate minhag, it's mavatel the halacha. Okay, we take it even further. What about this? There's a case here. We won't read the Shulchan Aruch now. A case in source 6. The Shulchan Aruch is talking about a mekach tois. A mekach tois in this scenario is a sale that is mistake. It's a invalid sale. And the case it's talking about in the Shulchan Aruch here is a case where you bought a cow from a kosher abattoir. It was shechted kahalacha. It was shechted appropriately. And then you open it, right? And you find it's treif because of the certain check. When we buy, a steak today, the process that cow has gone through in order for me, it's not just about how we shecht it. It's the lungs intact. There's different parts of checking that has to happen, and then preparation. So you open up the cow and you realize, it's actually a treif. Is it a mekach tois? Is it an invalid sale? Right? I bought it. It was kosher. It was killed properly. La halacha. It's a kosher animal, and you won't know until I take it home and open it. Actually, it's an invalid. Is it an invalid sale? Yes or no? What do you say? Yes, it's an invalid sale, right? So the Shulchan Aruch paskins, he decrees. 1 second, I just want to have a quick read to make sure. Yeah, he said, he said, this is an invalid sale. If you check the cow and it's not kosher, even though no one there tricked you, it's a mekachtos, it's an invalid sale. But then it comes on the Piskei Tshuva, it's one of the commentaries around on source 7. It says, actually, that's not our practice. In our communities, in these situations, by the way, it sounds a bit abstract, but they did happen, right? It's a common thing, right? You go to the local market and you buy a cow, you realize it wasn't kosher. In our communities, it's not considered a mekachtos. It's not considered invalid, and you have to keep it. So you go to the non-kosher market and you'll sell it on, you'll get your money back, fine. So comes along the Piskei Tshuva, says, yes, the halacha is, it's an invalid transaction, but our practice, our minhag, the way we actually work, the way we roll, as the young people say, is not like that. And that's how we practice. So again, you see another case where the minhag And I don't mean minhag like kick me up on Pesach. I'm talking the local practice procedures of how we do business override potentially what the halacha is. Don't try this at home, by the way, because we can't just pick something that we like. Belmont does this, which overrides halacha Torah Moshe Sinai, right? And I'm sure we feel like that sometimes. And maybe, but the flip side of that is actually there's a shul minhag, and you go to the fullness of yeshivas, and they don't do this, but this is what we do. So again, we're not. And that's very legitimate, often, not always, very legitimate, often. So plugging that all back in. What about the worker taking breaks? Right? So we said the worker taking breaks. Who is right? Can the worker take breaks? Based on what I've said. I mean, there's. If it's the practice of the makom.
When I work.
In Shell.
Never didn't specify coffee breaks.
Quite a second. Can you hear Salvador? Yeah, great. Keep talking.
But for years and years, well before the Second World War, the tea ladies and the coffee ladies used to come across twice in the morning and one in the afternoon. So conceivably, the tradition was to take 2 breaks in the morning and 1 in the afternoon.
So 100%. So Salvador says it was a known practice in your company, in your office, to take breaks. So according to what I've said, the contract doesn't say it. There's no halacha specifically, potentially about it. I'm going to show you why there is one in a second. But we would default to the working practices of the office. And you would say in those situations, if it was a general practice that one could take a coffee break from now and again, even if it's 3 or 4 times, if that's what everyone in the office is doing, isn't they? Enjoy it. Why not? Would you agree? You'd be happy with that? Yeah, even though we started off on the actual other foot. No, it's not in the contract. It's stealing time. Now, where did you get that from as well? So we get that from the last source here, it's actually a Shulchan Aruch, that says, yeah, Musa hapoyal shelo yivato ma'atkan el chayav ledaktek atzmo bezman sha'rekpidu al birchas revish al birchas hamazon. Says the Shulchan Aruch, a worker has to be so medayek, so specific, so exacting with his time or her time when they're working, in order not to steal, not to take away from the chiyuv, the obligation of the contract of the work I'm supposed to do. In as much so, if I've taken time to bench birchat hamazon, I should leave out the 4th bracha, that I shouldn't take time away from the employer. So you shouldn't make the bracha. You have to do, like Yaakov Avinu worked with all his koiches for his father and Lavan, so we have to work all our koiches for our employers as well. And he says in the last one, Havinenu is the shortened type of Amida. We don't really do it today, but there is a short Amida you can do instead of the 19 brachot that we do today. So it could also be, are you allowed to take a break for mincha in the day? It's not my contract, 15, 20 minutes. Am I allowed if I'm working for someone?
That's the practice in the office.
Oh, so if they say, I mean, I don't know whether they're legally allowed to say, no, you couldn't do it today, but am I not stealing from my employer by taking time? If I have to cut my benching, so there was a halacha that said you should do a very, very quick davening in the day. You should make time for davening, but you should do a short amida, because you don't want to take time away from your employer. But then it finishes off by saying, but today, even then, right, in the Shulchan Aruch in the 1600s, we're not makbid to make sure that the Amida is very short, because most people understand that you need to take time to pray, and that's very important. So plugging all this back in, I think one has to be very careful about praying, of course, but also to a point that what's known, accepted, and understood, and we have to be sensible about that, would also be the halacha, the law, Jewish law, would tell us how to act in that way. So if you're working in an environment that is encouraging and allowing breaks of such sort, even though we have to be medayek and exacting in all the time because we don't want to steal time, if it's accepted, that becomes best practice, and that is the halacha according to that. The other 2 other cases, we'll just finish quickly because I didn't bring all the sources. There's what about the paying on time one? The paying on time one, so we're talking about 30 days, this, that. If it's known in that industry of a vendor not not necessarily expecting the money straight away? Do I have an obligation anyway, even if it's known? There's a fascinating Gemara in Bava Basra, a Mishnah that talks about, the first Mishnah in Bava Basra talks about if you've got a chatzer, a court, it's got a courtyard, sorry, and you've got two neighbors, and they want to build a separation, a wall in between the courtyard. I'm simplifying a little bit. So the Mishnah discusses what type of wall should it be? What should it be made of? How big should it be? And what it comes out is, it depends on what type of walls they build in that place, which is a little bit how we work today, right? So a fence in Harrow might be different from a fence in, I don't know, Manchester. In terms of what you might expect to have, the length, the height, where the, how do you decide if your fence is this side or that side or that side? So those little details might actually just depend on the local borough. I don't know if they do, I'm just giving that example. So the Mishnah is talking about, if you want to build a wall, what materials, how big should it be milled up? No, you go on the Minhag Makom. So Tais was asked a question, he says, what if the local custom is to build walls out of straw? Now, why would you ever want to build a wall out of straw? It will blow away, it will burn, it will, it's a silly wall. However, what if that, in that tiny little town, that's what you did? The Tosfos answers, it's not talking about that. When the law or local practice is silly or is inappropriate, then we ignore it. Then we ignore it because it's most appropriate to do the most appropriate thing. So they take that and say, even if the minhag, the practice is not to pay vendors straight away, it's accepted, that's not, it's silly. Why would you not pay? You've got to pay people, you should pay people on time, that's the right way of doing things. So the halacha would say, even if it's known and it's okay, you should still try and do it as quickly as possible. And the last one is the strike. The TfL guard, train driver, does he have to strike with the union or not? Based on everything we said, any thoughts? The halacha. So if Moshe, in his writing, said he should strike with them. Why? Because the minhag, the custom of the area, you join, you sign up to something that is a part of something much greater than yourself. It's not a Jewish thing, we're all into the Jewish this and Jewish that, and the community this, which is very, very good, very, very praiseworthy. But there's also a realizations and accepting that we're part of a greater, bigger society. And if you sign up to that union and that union are doing it, you should join them. You should join them because that's appropriate, because that's what you are obligated to do. It's established, it's a proper and appropriate thing, it's an established place, and therefore you should follow them. Yeah, okay. So if speak to your local Orthodox rabbi. It depends on. The point was, let's say it was 99% of them, and you're the only one that doesn't want to. In that situation, if there's genuinely people not working, going to work, that's different. So that and that does happen. I know there's always, even during the strike, there's always a skeleton kind of crew. So that's fine. But we're talking about a case where you're the only one really. So any questions on anything we've said really, because that's what my offering for this evening. Interesting, different, yeah, less ethical actually in theory, in hindsight, but it is a bit ethical because when we're working where there's no prescribed law, and you're not going to ask your boss at an interview, how many coffee breaks can I have? I didn't ask you guys. Smoking breaks, right? For the gardener. Any questions down there on Zoom? Anyone even with us? No? You could hear okay? Yes, good. You're all muted, which is why I asked. Thank you for coming. Tell all your friends. Lots of love. Hanukkah Sameach.
Hanukkah Sameach, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Anytime.